How could you do this to me? The words tumbled from my lips in a strangled whisper as my world crumbled around me. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, my engagement party to Elliot, the man I had loved for years. Our families and friends had gathered to celebrate our future together. But in a dimly lit hallway, just steps away from the joyous festivities, I overheard a heated exchange that shattered every dream we'd built. "You need to end this. I can't keep lying to Cadence," Elliot hissed in a hushed tone. My heart seized as a too familiar voice responded. "Come on, Elliot. You know how much I need you. She'll never have to find out." Ren, my own sister. The one person I should have been able to trust implicitly. Her words sliced through me like shards of betrayed disbelief. Unable to remain silent a moment longer, I pushed open the door and confronted the two people I loved most in this world, having the most clandestine of conversations. As their startled gazes fell upon me, the reality of their affair hung thick in the air. "Cadence, I can explain," Ren began, her eyes already welling with crocodile tears. But I silenced her with a raised hand, unable to bear her lies a moment longer. "Save your hollow apologies." I turned to face Elliot, the man I had planned to spend my life with. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with scarcely restrained anguish. To his credit, he didn't prevaricate. 8 months. 8 months, while I had been meticulously planning our future, booking venues, trying on dresses. My dream wedding had become a sham even before it began. White-hot fury lanced through me, forcibly grounding me in that agonizing moment as I struggled not to crumple beneath the weight of such deceit. "The engagement is off," I declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "Both of you, get out of my sight." For once, Ren was mercifully silent as she swept past me, her eyes downcast. Elliot made as if to speak, but I shook my head sharply. "Don't," I warned him. Then they were gone, leaving me alone to process the sudden, brutal implosion of my life as I had known it. How could Ren, my closest confidant since childhood, have done this to me? And Elliot, he was supposed to cherish me above all others. The niggling sense of doubt and mistrust began worming its way through the cracks in my heart as I contemplated all the seemingly innocuous moments between them that may have hinted at this catastrophic betrayal. My mind rebelled against its own frantic analysis, leaving me emotionally unmoored in a sea of recrimination. Distantly, I became aware of the music and laughter from the next room, a mocking contrast to the tattered remnants of my life. I couldn't face my friends, my family, not like this. Squaring my shoulders, I spun on my heel and hastened in the opposite direction, away from the dream I had harbored and the brutal reality that was my new normal. As I slipped out a side door into the darkness of the night, the first fat drops of rain began to fall as if in mocking commiseration of my plight. My engagement, my heart, my very world, all of it shattered by those I loved and trusted most. But beneath the all-consuming ache of betrayal, an ember of rage flickered to life, vowing that one day, somehow, I would have my vengeance. I should have seen it coming, really. The signs were there all along, if I'm being honest with myself, which is something I haven't really allowed until now. Growing up, Ren was always the favored child. Beautiful, vivacious, the embodiment of everything my mother Lorelei had dreamed of in a daughter. I, on the other hand, was the awkward bystander constantly laboring for their approval and affection. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" my mother would lament, oblivious to the cutting words. Or perhaps she understood their sting all too well. While Ren commanded the admiring gaze of every room she entered, I faded into the background unnoticed, a perpetual wallflower overshadowed by her dazzling radiance. Over time, envy and resentment took root within me, toxic seeds that would only fester as the years passed. Father was no help, maintaining a cordial but distant demeanor with both of us. I often wonder if he sensed the growing rivalry between Ren and I and simply chose to avoid adding fuel to that fire. His hands-off approach likely did more damage than he realized. The one solace I found was in my friendship with Marcus Bishop, who lived just down the street. Warm and kind-hearted, he treated me with a simple decency that was so achingly absent at home. While his affections likely extended beyond mere friendship, I was too consumed by my insecurities and need for familial acceptance to truly appreciate what was right in front of me. It was during high school that the dynamic between Ren and I took its most toxic turn. As her beauty and confidence bloomed, boyfriends and suitors flocked to bask in her radiant presence. But it never lasted, a fact I didn't fully comprehend until years later. She seduced my boyfriend right out from under me, Casey Harrington accused with righteous indignation after one of Ren's romantic conquests. I should have known she was just using me to get closer to him. At the time, I dismissed it as petty sour grapes from a jealous ex-friend. But the frequency of those accusations lodged in my subconscious like a persistent splinter I couldn't dislodge. It wasn't until college that I started noticing more suspicious signs of Ren's deceitful nature. Once, she befriended Amanda Lewis, only to steal her idea for a social media marketing app and present the concept to potential investors as her own. Amanda was too distraught and intimidated by our family's wealth to fight the intellectual property theft. When I finally worked up the nerve to confront Ren about her underhanded treatment of Amanda, she simply rolled her eyes. "Don't be so naive, Katie. I'm an opportunist, not a criminal. You'd do well to start looking out for number one, too, instead of being so boringly ethical." Her callous disregard for Amanda's plundered dreams disturbed me, as did the realization that perhaps my parents' indulgent favoritism had warped Ren into developing such sociopathic tendencies. For the first time, I began distancing myself from the family, perpetually enamored with her charms. But still, the insidious self-doubt prevented me from recognizing the full extent of Ren's toxicity, until one fateful night shattered my naivety once and for all. That betrayal reconfirmed every past suspicion, every inkling that something was deeply rotten within my sister's core. But this time, the treachery cut too deeply to ignore any longer. As hurt and unmoored as I felt in the wake of Elliot and Ren's revealed affair, the fury coursing through me eclipsed it all. That deceptive snake had taken the one thing that meant everything to me, my chance at happiness. And for that she would pay dearly. No more willfully ignoring the signs, brushing off accusations, or deluding myself into familial dysfunction. Ren's days of exploiting my trusting nature were over. This time, I would be the one to claim the ultimate victory. The click of Ren's heels faded as she swept out of my apartment, leaving me alone to process the cataclysmic implosion of my life. I sank onto the couch, numb disbelief slowly giving way to a roiling amalgam of emotions: fury, anguish, determination. I had ended my engagement to Elliot and severed ties with Ren in one cataclysmic confrontation. But now the dust had settled. The magnitude of their betrayal began crystallizing into an inescapable truth. They had to pay. My thoughts were interrupted by a tentative rapping at the door. I tensed, half expecting it to be Elliot or Ren attempting further pathetic appeals. But the familiar voices drifting through made me exhale heavily. "Cadence? It's Mom and Dad. Can we come in?" Of course they would have heard the fallout by now. Steeling myself, I crossed the room and cracked open the door, revealing my parents' concerned visages. Mom immediately pulled me into an awkward embrace as Dad hovered nearby, his usual stoicism in place. "We just heard the most terrible rumors," Mom fretted as she released me. "About you, Ellie, and—" She trailed off, unable to give voice to the reality. "It's true," I stated flatly. "I caught them together. The engagement is off." Mom's eyes widened in dismay, but Dad simply nodded as if he had been expecting such news all along. "I suspected as much," he murmured. "The writing has been on the wall with Ren for years." His tacit acknowledgement of her deceitful nature was both validating and enraging. If he recognized those tendencies, why had he never addressed them? Why had I been left floundering and doubting my own instincts while she spun her web of lies and manipulations? Mom, meanwhile, looked utterly gobsmacked. "Ren? And Elliot?" She clutched Dad's arm for support. "But she's your sister, and Elliot was going to be family." I laughed bitterly at her apparent naivete. Hadn't she been present for all the red flags, all the shady incidents that presaged this very betrayal? How could she still be so blind to the truth about her cherished youngest daughter? "Mom, wake up," I said, none too gently. "This has been a long time coming. Ren has been lying and using people for years. I was just too infatuated with her charms and your obvious favoritism to see it for what it was." The words lashed out harsher than intended, but I didn't regret their sting. My parents flinched as if I had struck them physically. Cadence, that's not fair. Dad rumbled in a low tone. You're letting your anger over this unpleasantness cloud your judgment. We've never favored one child over the other. I barked out a mirthless laugh. No? Then where was this paternal concern when I was constantly being berated and compared unfavorably to Ren growing up? Where was your support when she stole ideas and boyfriends from friends with impunity? Mom at least had the decency to appear abashed. Dad simply leveled his inscrutable gaze at me, utterly unmoved. You're overreacting, he pronounced at last. What's done is done. For the family's sake, you need to let this go and try to repair things with your sister. The audacity of his words struck me into momentary, dumbstruck silence. Let it go? After the devastation they had wrought? Unbelievable. Get out, I bit out, fighting to control the tremor of rage in my voice. Both of you, just get out of my sight. Cadence, please. Mom began, but Dad gripped her elbow firmly. You heard your daughter, he stated impassively. We'll go. But mark my words, this grudge will only lead you down a path of misery and bitterness. For your own sake, I hope you'll see reason before it consumes you entirely. With that parting admonition, he ushered Mom out and closed the door behind them with a dull thunk. I stared at the portal for several moments, letting the finality of Dad's words hang heavy in the air. But rather than cowing me into resignation, they fortified my resolve. If my own parents were too entrenched in denial to support me against Ren's machinations, then I would have to pursue justice alone. The rage that had been steadily building now took on a fevered intensity. Forget repairing bonds, this time I would shatter them asunder first. Once and for all, Ren would feel the scorching consequences of her selfish, duplicitous actions. Fueled by a righteous fury, I began meticulously plotting my next steps. Evidence had to be compiled, allies recruited to my cause. No stone could be left unturned in exposing the truth and dismantling the pedestal my family insisted on keeping Ren upon, no matter how much collateral damage occurred. She had declared war upon my future the moment she set her sights on Elliot. And in war, I fully intended to annihilate her. In the days following my parents' ill-fated intervention, a cold determination took root within me. If they weren't going to hold Ren accountable, then I would pursue justice myself, no matter how merciless it appeared. My first steps were basic but necessary reconnaissance. I began discreetly reaching out to Ren's former friends and romantic associates, carefully piecing together a timeline of her selfish manipulations and lies. The stories came pouring in like a ruptured dam once those burned bridges realized I was earnestly interested in exposing her misdeeds. Amanda Lewis, the entrepreneur whose marketing app idea had been stolen. Jessica Kim, whose boyfriend Ren had not so subtly seduced away. A parade of scorned exes and discarded confidantes lining up to deliver scathing testimonies. I documented every sordid account, every underhanded betrayal in a meticulous trail of evidence that would fuel the looming confrontation. But I knew more ammunition was still required to impact my family's entrenched adoration for Ren. Which is how I found myself at Marcus Bishop's doorstep one rain-swept evening, my old childhood friend and oft unrequited love startled to receive me. Cadence? What's going on? He asked, brow creasing with concern as he took in my taut expression. You look intense. Can I come in? I brushed past him without preamble. I need your help with something. Confusion flickered over his features, but Marcus acquiesced as he always did where I was involved. Inside his modest home, I wasted no time laying out the crux of the mission. I'm going to take Ren down, I declared bluntly, and I need an ally who has no qualms about getting their hands dirty. His jaw went slack as I detailed the evidence I'd gathered thus far of Ren's myriad wrongdoings over the years, up to and including her role in sabotaging my engagement to Elliot. By the time I finished, Marcus's expression had hardened into one of grim resolve. You know you can count on me, he said, all traces of the jovial boy I'd known now supplanted by an intensity that matched my own. After what your family put us through in high school, it'll be my pleasure to help dismantle the facade. I arched an eyebrow, recalling the hurtful memories he alluded to. While I had been too consumed by my impossible quest for Ren's approval, Marcus had borne the brunt of her disdain and cruelty simply for daring to be attracted to me. The fact that he still harbored a willingness to be in my corner spoke volumes. Thank you, I said with simple sincerity. With you on board, this is really happening. The first embers of what would become an unstoppable conflagration. Over the following days and weeks, Marcus and I built an impregnable dossier that left no treacherous stone of Wren's life upturned. Financial records illuminating her business indiscretions, a staggering body count of ruined friendships and romantic deceit, even a trail of online harassment targeting those who had initially scorned her. All of it was rigorously compiled as a case to be presented before the jury of our family's judgment. Throughout this process, I deflected every overture from Wren with icy silence, refusing to engage with her feeble pleas for reconciliation and forgiveness. I knew such hollow entreaties were simply preamble to further manipulation on her part. That pathology ran too deep to be undone by mere words. Only the devastating truth, once and for all laid bare before our relatives, had any hope of breaking her spell and toppling her unearned pedestal. Meanwhile, the dividing lines within the family grew increasingly defined. Mom persisted in her refusal to take sides, steadfastly avoiding the issue in a desperate bid to preserve the illusion of civility. Dad's pragmatic pragmatism aligned him more with me, though he refrained from outright condemning Wren's actions. And then there were the neutral observers reserving judgment until all was revealed at the looming reckoning I had meticulously planned, our annual family reunion, which promised to be more reality-shatteringly combustible than any beforehand. As the date grew nearer, I could feel the stakes, the intractable tensions ratcheting to an inexorable breaking point. Marcus and I had gathered the damning truth about Wren. Now came the moment of detonating that truth before a captive audience, once and for all, casting her into the scorching illumination she had diligently avoided for far too long. No more shadows to slither within, no more deceit or treachery to conceal. This would be the flames that forged the aftermath of a new reality, by whatever means were necessary. As the annual Monroe family reunion loomed, the chasm between myself and Wren calcified into an impassable rift. Every attempt at reconciliation on her part was met with stony silence and refusal to engage. My single-minded focus remained on fortifying the case against her, to protect myself from any hint of relenting in the face of her master manipulation tactics. Marcus, meanwhile, proved to be an invaluable ally in ensuring my resolve never wavered. "You're doing the right thing, Cadence," he stated with a firm nod one evening as we reviewed the mounting evidence file. "Wren's deception has to be exposed, no matter how much it disrupts the family." I felt something inside me settle at his pragmatic words, shoring up my convictions. "Do you really think if we lay out all the facts before everyone, they'll finally see her for what she is?" A pensive look passed over Marcus's features. "I'd like to hope so. But you have to be prepared for the probability that some will remain willfully blind to the truth." My jaw clenched at the thought. After all the undeniable proof we had compiled, testimony after testimony from Wren's litany of victims, how could anyone not be swayed from their entrenched positions? Unless, "You think Mom and Dad knew, don't you?" I accused, the horrible notion coalescing into grim reality. About the level of Wren's depravity, that's why they urged me to just forgive and move past her affair with Elliot. Marcus exhaled heavily. "I don't know for sure, but the signs were there, and we both know your parents favor her to an unhealthy degree. I wouldn't put it past them to ignore or excuse her indiscretions to maintain appearances." White-hot fury lanced through me at the thought of such outrageous dereliction on their part. But then, Dad had basically admitted as much in our last confrontation, callously demanding I repair things with Wren for the family's sake. If that's the case, they're just as culpable as she is, and they'll be held accountable too. The hard glint that entered Marcus's eyes confirmed his alignment with me on this path of reckoning. No one would be exempt from having their role in enabling Wren's depredations laid bare. In the meantime, other members of the extended family began fragmenting into factions, those siding with Wren's professed innocence, and those reserving judgment until they saw the proof for themselves. Rumor and gossip percolated unchecked through the grapevine as the reunion date drew nearer. It came as little surprise when Aunt Margot, Wren's most ardent supporter, cornered me while I was inspecting the reunion venue. "This ridiculous vendetta has gone on long enough," she snapped without preamble, eyes flashing with indignation. I regarded her coolly, long inured to her relentless preferential treatment of Wren. I have evidence, Aunt Margot. Too much to ignore, even for you. She made a disdainful noise, adjusting her gaudy fur stole. Evidence? Of what? That poor, innocent Wren may have made some minor indiscretions in her youth? She's a grown woman now, and any issues between you two should have been laid to rest ages ago. Revulsion twisted my gut at her blasé dismissal. Evidence be damned. Wren's legions of apologists would never be dissuaded by facts. I opened my mouth to retort, but Margot barreled onward. Mark my words. If you insist on airing out this meaningless grudge at the reunion, it's your standing with the family that will suffer most dearly. Think on that before throwing more absurd allegations at your sister. With that parting threat hanging in the air, she spun on one alligator-skinned heel and flounced away before I could respond. I was left fuming in the midst of the very venue where the battle lines would soon be brutally and uncompromisingly drawn. Margot's sneering disregard strengthened my resolve more than any pleas for capitulation could have eroded it. If Wren's supporters were that entrenched in denial and blind devotion, then nothing short of bloody warfare would suffice to shatter their foolish idolatry. When next the extended clan assembled, the reckoning would be inescapable. I now understood that upheaval was inevitable in order to excise the cancer of Wren's sociopathic influence once and for all. So be it then. Whatever the permanent fractures and severed bonds, the scales would finally be balanced, no matter how much upheaval was required. There could be no half measures, no compromise when absolute justice was the only acceptable outcome. As I strode out of the venue with purposed strides, I felt the sudden exhilarating clarity of a woman locking onto her crusade's trajectory and seeing it through regardless of consequence or collateral damage. For too long, Wren had sown ruination without repercussion. Now, at long last, she would reap the whirlwind of merciless retribution. The annual Monroe family reunion was always an ostentatious affair, owing to my parents' predilection for shameless displays of wealth and status. This year's no-expense-spared Venetian masquerade ball theme only amplified the pretentious grandeur. But beneath the glamorous marble floors and glittering chandeliers, an electric current of tension thrummed through the assembled masses, rife with unspoken expectation. Perhaps it emanated from my own coiled determination as I watched the revelers circulate with studied nonchalance. I caught a familiar flash of auburn in the crowd and felt my gut tighten reflexively. Wren, resplendent in a cream-colored gown with an intricately beaded mask, accepted adoring compliments from a knot of family members with her trademark, beguiling smile. It was sickening to behold her deceptions being so blindly celebrated. But that was all about to change. A steadying hand came to rest on my elbow, and I glanced over to meet Marcus's resolute gaze through his own black silk mask. A silent affirmation that he had my back, no matter the chaos that was about to unfurl. I gave a tight nod, then turned and weaved through the gathered throngs until I reached the raised platform at the head of the ballroom. Retrieving a weighty manila envelope from my clutch, I rapped my knuckles decisively against the microphone to summon the room's attention. The festive din evaporated, all eyes swiveling to fasten upon me in bewildered curiosity. Even Wren's impeccably masked expression dimmed with trepidation. Good. Let the first seed of doubt take root. Good evening, everyone, I began in a tone that brokered no warmth. And thank you for being here to commemorate another year of the Monroe family legacy. I let the seemingly innocuous statement linger for a beat before delivering the detonation. A legacy, I'm afraid, that has been irrevocably tarnished by one individual's chronic deceit and depravity. For too long, that person has been permitted to indulge her poisonous impulses, while the rest of us have averted our eyes or made excuses. A susurrus of bewildered muttering rippled through the crowd. In my periphery, I could see Mom and Dad shooting me alarmed looks, while Aunt Margot's face turned an obstructed plum hue. Only Marcus remained impassive, silently urging me onward from beside the stage. No more, I declared into the microphone, relishing the undercurrent of sharpening tension. Tonight, the truth will be laid bare for us all to confront, because if we don't purge this toxic influence from our family, it will only fester and rot us from within. With a sharp gesture, I ripped open the manila envelope and upended its contents in a cascading deluge of documentation across the stage. Photographs, financial statements, reams of written testimony detailing every sordid misdeed spilled out in a damning, tangled heap at my feet. The impact was palpable, a collective inhalation of breath from the assembled as they beheld the staggering body of evidence. The muttering swelled in disbelieving volatility. "You see this?" I stabbed a manicured fingertip towards the incriminating morass. Proof of deception, betrayal, even criminal actions, all at the hands of one person, brazenly indulging their appetite for ruining the lives of others. My gaze bored into Wren's now as her mask of composure began slipping, the first glimmer of icy panic seeping through. Flicking my wrist, I produced a sheaf of papers with a thick report binding, holding it aloft for all to see. This comprehensive case study documents years of misdeeds, going all the way back to high school with the calculated sabotage of friendships and romantic relationships. With contemptuous fury, I lobbed the report like a thrown gauntlet to bounce and skid across the floor directly before Wren. Every wronged friend or former lover whose life you played with like personal Jenga tiles. Every kind-hearted dupe like Amanda Lewis, whose innovative business concept you stole out from under her without a shred of remorse. It's all delineated here in both their words and undeniable documentation. I paused to sweep my hardened stare over the veritable sea of slack-jawed expressions, willfully oblivious allegiances now being ripped asunder by the inexorable truth. "You didn't think anyone was watching, did you, Wren?" I sneered into the ringing silence. "That your carefully crafted mask of charm and feminine wiles would let you slither through life unscathed, no matter who you bulldozed in your path." Compulsively, I started pacing in a predatory arc around the horrified statue of my sister, driving the point home with merciless precision. "Well, your pathology ends here. Since Dad urged me to put this messy affair behind me for the family's sake, I've decided to heed his advice by purging the cancer that is your toxic existence from our family once and for all." The blow finally landed, a visible flinch from Dad's stricken expression as regret and self-recrimination clouded his features. But there would be no more enabling, no matter how deep the denial ran. As if surfacing from a daze, Wren jolted back to defensive posturing, chin uplifted in a transparent attempt to retain her shaken mask of superiority. "You're deranged if you think anyone will give credence to this ridiculo. You had an affair with my fiance, Elliot." I didn't let her venom-laced dismissal gain traction, swiftly landing the most visceral gut punch in full view of everyone. A strangled gasp from Mom pierced the heavy silence before I pressed on relentlessly. "For 8 months, you were oiling the depths of your deceptions by sleeping with my fiancé while lying to my face every single day. So don't even try playing the wounded innocent in the face of overwhelming evidence. Your reign of treachery is over, dear sister." Wren's mouth moved in a stunned rictus, but I had already turned away to face the ballroom once more, garnet eyes blazing with righteous justification. Now it falls upon this family to determine the next steps, whether we countenance and enable such poisonous impulses in our midst any longer, or if we avail ourselves of this truth, confront it head-on, and rebuild from the ashes stronger than before. But mark my words. I skewered Wren with a contemptuous glare, every fiber brimming with conviction. I will never stop until you face the consequences of your abhorrent actions. No matter what it costs me, this ends tonight. There it was, the gauntlet thrown, the die irrevocably cast. As murmurs of shock and recrimination swelled to fevered pitch, I stepped back to allow the maelstrom to gain unstoppable momentum. The reckoning had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ballroom erupted into pandemonium the moment the final damning words left my lips. A cacophony of shouts, gasps, and furious denials ricocheted through the assembled masses as the staggering truth sliced through years of willful delusion. Wren, for all her guile and predatory instincts, seemed to have been robbed of the power of speech. She stood there amidst the chaos, rooted to the spot and ashen-faced, as the carefully cultivated facade began cracking beyond repair. "Lies!" Aunt Margot's strident screech pierced through the din as the woman I had once pitied for her obsequious devotion to Wren flew into a virulent rage. This is nothing but deranged, spiteful lies born of jealousy. She pitched forward, clawing hands outstretched, as if to snatch up and rend apart the damning evidence strewn at my feet. Before she could take more than 2 steps, Marcus materialized from the shadows and caught Margot's flailing wrists in a restraining grip. "Don't do anything rash you'll regret," he warned her in a low tone thick with menace. Margot's eyes bulged in outrage and disbelief until she recognized her would-be assailant. Then her expression congealed into one of utter loathing as realization set in. "The poor boy finally became Cadence's lapdog, I see," she spat with vile insinuation. "Did she promise to let you sample a taste if you helped her with this insane crusade?" A muscle ticked in Marcus's jaw, but he released Margot with a look of pure disgust before rejoining my side, steadfast and resolute. I felt fortified by his presence, squaring my shoulders to face the mounting pandemonium. "Listen to yourselves," I shouted over the escalating tumult. This desperate need to attack the messenger, rather than confront the grievous truth staring you all in the face. Ren is a master manipulator who will say anything, do anything to preserve the facade you've all embraced like gullible fools. That succeeded in redirecting the outrage towards its proper target. Ren visibly startled as a acidic murmur of condemnation rippled outwards, causing bystanders to recoil from her as if burned. "It can't be true," Mom whispered brokenly, tears spilling down her ravaged face as she clutched Dad's arm in desperation. "My baby girl could never." I actually felt a fleeting pang of empathy as I beheld Mom's world shattering under the relentless weight of proof. But it was far too late for sympathy to sway me. Whatever trauma she and Dad were enduring now, they had brought upon themselves with their indulgence of Ren's toxicity over the years. "Wake up and smell the truth, Mother," I stated with a tinge of weary impatience. "Your proud daughter is a sociopath who has wreaked havoc on everyone around her for her own selfish gratification." A strangled sound escaped Ren then, causing all eyes to rivet upon her. For the first time, the malicious glint I had always subconsciously recoiled from blazed hot and unrestrained in her gaze. All artifice, all attempts at dissembling had been abandoned. "You ungrateful," she hissed with naked hatred. "After all I sacrificed to make something of myself, to pull myself up and out of Mom and Dad's miserable shadow? You're just jealous that I surpassed you by sheer willpower." "Sacrificed?" I echoed with bitter mockery. "Tell that to the legions of loved ones you sacrificed in your warpath of using and discarding lives for your own vainglorious desires." That struck a nerve, a visible wince passing over Ren's features as if rebuked. But the moment's self-awareness was fleeting, as she quickly regained her malignant contempt. "You want to tear down my world out of petty grievances?" Her voice rang out in silken menace. "I played by the rules society dictated and reaped the rewards. Don't come crying to me just because you lacked the fortitude to do the same, dear sister." A roll of revulsion twisted through me at her blatant rationalization, her utter refusal to accept wrongdoing even when confronted so baldly. This was why the extreme measures had been necessary. Ren's sociopathic conviction was too deeply entrenched for redemption. Before I could formulate a retort, a commanding baritone cut through the tension like a scythe. "Enough of this." All eyes swiveled as Dad stepped forward, his expression chillingly impassive, save for a glacial glint of finality. "You've shown your true colors for all to see, Ren. Outlined a life's litany of treachery and callous betrayals against friends, associates, even your own family." The devastated look he flashed towards Mom broke through the stony facade for just an instant as visible anguish. "Tonight, we face some harsh truths about the person you've become. But my decision regarding retribution is clear." He drew a steadying breath, seeming to draw an air of grim majesty about himself as if preparing to pronounce judgment upon the transgressions before him. "From this moment, you are exiled from this family, severed from the Monroe legacy, our bloodline, everything. For your misdeeds and refusal to accept responsibility or remorse, you are disowned in perpetuity." A dismayed cry from Ren rent the expectant hush as the words reverberated with incontrovertible finality. I could only stare, momentarily awash in shock that Dad had delivered such a devastating pronouncement. Not just cut off financially, societally shunned and scorned, but disowned in the most elemental sense. rendered a non-entity in terms of lineage and ties to our clan forevermore. It was a punishment as extreme as the litany of sins we had brought to light. One wren seemed to belatedly understand the gravity of. No. The anguished moan emerged piteous and small, a far cry from the imperious sociopath who had attempted to gaslight us with rationalizations mere moments ago. Father? Father, please. I'm still your daughter? But Dad's features were already hardening once more, all hint of inner turmoil calcifying to iron resolution. No daughter of mine could inflict such profound betrayals with no compunction. The very DNA you inherited from the Monroe bloodline has been rendered null and void this night. He turned away then, wrapping a protective arm around Mom's shuddering shoulders, as outrage and accusations began swirling anew amidst the assemblage. From the corner of my eye, I could see Aunt Margot gesturing furiously at anyone who would listen, no doubt attempting to undermine and subvert Dad's decree. But even she had been utterly steamrolled beneath the possession of bitter truth and culpability finally laid bare. My gaze was inexorably drawn back to Wren, crumpled on the floor now, like some pathetic, discarded marionette shorn of its strings. Her expression was one of naked anguish, a haunted realization that the ignominy of excommunication from everything she cherished had irrevocably taken root. She met my stare head-on, desperation writ large in her eyes, not for forgiveness or absolution, but to silently beg me to deliver a stay of execution against the sentence handed down. I simply regarded her impassively, and offering no solace or mitigation against the inferno of reckoning she had brought crashing down upon herself. There was only a vacant, hollow pity for the shattered megalith, realizing too late that true consequence had finally arrived to dismantle her pedestal of depravity. This was the moment I had sacrificed and bled to achieve, the undeniable silencing of Wren's pernicious influence at long last. Not through placation or insincere pleas for change, but the laying of a scorched earth in the searing aftermath of her flames. In the days and weeks following Wren's cataclysmic downfall at the family reunion, an uneasy detente settled over the Monroe clan. The shockwaves from my shattering revelations and Dad's subsequent disownment decree had rent us asunder, but not irrevocably so. At least, not for those willing to stare unflinchingly into the truths that had been dragged into the harsh light of reality. A sort of grim solidarity emerged from the ranks who had borne witness to Wren's unmasking that fateful night. Those who recognized the justness in finally severing her toxic influences from our midst, no matter how excruciating the personal costs. And there were indeed heavy personal costs to absorb for many. Mom, God bless her, had retreated into a shell of haggard disbelief in those first few weeks. Between losing a daughter she loved despite her misdeeds and culpability for enabling those misdeeds, I couldn't fathom the depths of her turmoil. Dad, conversely, seemed almost galvanized by the brutal reckoning he had helped mete out, as if cauterizing the malignant limb had been a purgative act, allowing him to stride forth renewed from the ashes of dysfunction. Our family's integrity has been preserved, he told me stoically during a rare moment of bonding between us. Painful as the means were, the path ahead is now unobstructed from corrosive influences. I remember searching his craggy features' uncertainty in those instants, looking for any hint of lingering inner conflict or doubt over the irrevocable verdict he had handed down upon his own progeny. But there was only the same patented composure and resolution that had always defined James Monroe. How he could rationalize his decision with such stark pragmatism, I may never fully comprehend. But then, our entire dynamic had been forever reshaped now in the searing conflagration that was Wren's self-immolation. The shockwaves extended outward, too, with various relatives fracturing off into splintered factions almost overnight. Some, like Aunt Margot, vehemently castigating Dad's ruling while rushing to stand in solidarity with the exiled Wren. Others distancing themselves from the inferno of inner turmoil entirely. And still others, well, Marcus and I gained some unlikely new voices championing our tenacious pursuit of justice, no matter how devastating the costs. It was yet another example of boundaries being redrawn, of the tectonic family plates shifting forever in the aftershocks. But I felt a sense of lightness, too, the first freedom from Wren's overhanging shadow I could remember feeling. That poisonous umbra had been eradicated at long last, allowing the first rays of redemption to break through. Marcus was with me every step as I trod those first tentative steps into reclaiming my life's trajectory. From ensuring Elliot faced the full legal and professional ramifications for his betrayal to determinedly rebuilding the tarnished dynamics with Mom and Dad. "You were the catalyst for renewal, Cadence," Marcus reminded me with a steadying hand on my arm whenever my regrets or doubts threatened to eclipse the path ahead. "Don't let the momentary growing pains overshadow the healthier family you've fought to reclaim." Those words anchored me more times than I could count through the arduous slog of confronting wounds, lancing toxicity, and enduring the fallout of realigned bonds, until, finally, the dust began settling on the smoldering aftermath. There was so much wreckage to confront in that ashen landscape, both within the family and surrounding it from Wren and Elliot's devastation trail. But I surveyed the damaged sites now as a master craftsman might, already plotting out the blueprint for reconstruction from the strongest of building blocks. That was the paradoxical gift of Wren's excision from my life, you see. In dismantling her poisonous tentacles, I had cleared the detritus of dysfunction to reveal the bedrock truth that I was the architect of my own identity. No more falling into lockstep behind a sociopathic sibling's delirious wake just to chase hollow approval, or reflexively adhering to toxic family patterns from childhood. I was free to build upon my own terms, the raw materials being the redemptive bonds with those walking beside me. My eyes would inevitably be drawn to Marcus during those pivotal, transcendent moments, the steadfast best friend who had championed me even when I could not see my own worth, who now stood by my side with a renewed glint in his eyes, silently willing me into this next rebirthed phase of life. There was warmth, affection, and perhaps even a tantalizing frisson of new possibilities shimmering between us each time our gazes met and held in those cathartic moments. A sense that the razing of my former existence had not been for naught, but had instead cleared the path for something brilliant and imminently worth fighting for. When at last I felt the final vestiges of Wren's shadow lifted forever from my soul, it was Marcus's steady hand entwined in mine, twin pillars striding forth into the light together as new lives took radiant shape.